My name is Irene Thompson, and I'm 67 years old. For 38 years, I taught third grade at Maplewood Elementary here in Ohio. I thought I knew everything about reading people, especially children. But nothing prepared me for the moment I discovered my own son had taken out life insurance policies on me, worth over $1 million. That evening, as David handed me a glass of water with his usual loving smile, my hands trembled. Because just hours earlier I had found the documents that changed everything. I knew that glass might contain more than just water. Before I share what happened next, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more real stories from real people. And trust me, you'll want to stick around for this one, because what I discovered about my son will shock you to your core. Now let me tell you how the son I raised and loved tried to kill me for money. David had always been my miracle child. Born when I was 29, he came after years of trying and several heartbreaking miscarriages. His father left when David was just 5, so it was just the two of us against the world. Those early years were tough, but David grew into such a kind, thoughtful boy. He'd bring me wildflowers from the school playground and help me grade papers at the kitchen table. But his 20s were rough. David struggled with gambling, lost 2 jobs, and racked up serious debt. He moved to California, and for years our relationship was strained. Phone calls became rare, visits even rarer. I worried constantly, sending money I couldn't really afford, hoping he'd find his way. Then 2 years ago, everything changed. David called to tell me he'd gotten clean found work as an insurance agent and wanted to come home. When he walked through my front door last spring, I barely recognized him. Gone was the thin, anxious young man I remembered. This David was confident, well-dressed, successful-looking. He hugged me tight and apologized for all the lost years. Over the past 18 months, David had become the perfect son. He moved back to our hometown of Greenfield and rented a nice apartment downtown. His insurance office was thriving, he said, and he'd even started dating a lovely woman named Sarah. Every Sunday, he'd come for dinner, often arriving early to help with yard work or small repairs around my house. When my roof started leaking last winter, David spent an entire weekend fixing it himself. When my kitchen sink backed up, he had it running perfectly again within hours. He organized my medicine cabinet, helped me understand Medicare changes, and even convinced me to get a new smartphone so we could text more easily. I felt so proud watching him succeed. During our Sunday dinners, he'd tell me about his clients, how he was helping families protect their futures through proper insurance coverage. He spoke passionately about his work, explaining how life insurance gave people peace of mind, knowing their loved ones would be financially secure. The transformation was remarkable. My friends at church constantly commented on how wonderful it was to have David back, how blessed I was to have such a devoted son. Margaret from next door often mentioned how she'd see him coming and going, always with a smile and a wave. Even my doctor, Dr. Patterson, remarked during my last checkup how nice it was that I had family nearby as I aged. David would bring flowers sometimes, always remembering my favorite yellow roses. He'd fix my computer when it acted up and patiently taught me how to use online banking. When winter came, he'd shovel my driveway before I even realized it had snowed. Neighbors would joke that they wished their adult children were half as attentive. Looking back now, I realized there were signs. Small things that seemed thoughtful at the time, but later felt intrusive. David had developed an unusual interest in my health and daily routines. During our conversations, he'd casually ask about my doctor appointments, what medications I was taking, whether I'd updated my will recently. At first, I attributed this to professional habit. As an insurance agent, he naturally thought about these things. When he asked about my medical history, I figured he was just making sure I had adequate health coverage. When he inquired about my prescription schedule, I assumed he was being a caring son, making sure I wasn't missing doses. But the questions became more frequent and detailed. David would ask specific things like exactly what time I took my blood pressure medication, whether I ever felt dizzy or confused, how often I saw Dr. Patterson. He seemed particularly interested in my evening routine, asking what time I usually went to bed, whether I locked all my doors if I ever had trouble sleeping. One afternoon, I caught him going through my mail. When I asked what he was doing, he smiled and said he was just helping me organize my bills and insurance statements. It seemed reasonable, even helpful, so I didn't think much of it. But I noticed he was particularly focused on anything from my bank or insurance companies. David also insisted on updating my emergency contacts everywhere. He added himself to my bank accounts as an authorized user, saying it would make things easier if I ever needed help managing my finances. He updated my information at the doctor's office, making sure they had his current phone number as my primary contact. I started noticing he'd take phone calls in another room when he visited. When he'd return, he'd often be making notes on his phone or writing numbers on scraps of paper. When I asked who had called, he'd give vague answers about work or say it was Sarah making dinner plans. The morning I found him photographing my prescription bottles was when I first felt genuinely uncomfortable. I'd come downstairs early and caught him in my kitchen holding up my blood pressure medication to the light, taking pictures with his phone. When he saw me, he quickly put the bottle down and said he was just checking the dosage to make sure I was taking the right amount. Margaret mentioned something that bothered me too. She said David had stopped by one afternoon when I was out and asked detailed questions about my daily routine. What time did I usually go for walks? Did I ever leave my doors unlocked? How often did I use my car? At the time, Margaret thought he was just being protective, but something about the way she described his questions made me uneasy. Then there was the incident with my spare house key. I'd always kept one hidden under a flower pot by my back door. One day, I noticed it was missing. When I mentioned it to David, he said he'd taken it for safekeeping and had made copies, giving me two and keeping one himself in case of emergencies. Again, it seemed logical, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he was becoming too involved in my personal business. The discovery happened on a Tuesday evening in October. David had come for our usual dinner but seemed distracted and rushed. He kept checking his phone and finally said he needed to leave early for a work emergency. In his hurry, he forgot his leather briefcase by my front door. I planned to call him immediately, but the briefcase was heavy, and when I picked it up to move it to a safe spot, the latches popped open. Papers scattered across my hardwood floor. As I knelt to gather them up, my blood ran cold. The first document I saw was a life insurance application with my name typed across the top. My full legal name, Irene Margaret Thompson, along with my correct birth date, social security number, and address. But the signature at the bottom, supposedly mine, looked wrong. Similar to my handwriting, but too careful, too perfect. The policy amount made my stomach drop $800,000. The beneficiary listed was David Michael Thompson, my son. My hands shook as I read through the medical information section. Details about my health history, prescription medications, and family medical background were filled in completely, all in what appeared to be my handwriting, but I had never provided this information to any insurance company. But that wasn't all. There was a second application from a different insurance company, Metropolitan Life, for an additional $600,000. Same beneficiary, same forged signature, same detailed medical information I'd never given. David had taken out nearly $1.5 million in life insurance policies on me without my knowledge. I found copies of my birth certificate and social security card documents I thought I'd lost years ago. Apparently, David had taken them and had copies made. There were also photocopies of my Medicare card, driver's license, and even my passport from my last trip to visit my sister in Florida 5 years ago. Most disturbing was a manila folder containing what looked like research. Printed articles about elderly people dying from medication interactions, statistics about accidental deaths in people over 65, and information about how quickly certain substances could cause heart problems in people with my medical conditions. Hidden in the back pocket of the briefcase was an appointment card for a medical exam I'd supposedly scheduled with a company doctor for the insurance applications. The appointment was set for the following week, but I had never made any such appointment. My teacher training kicked in, and I forced myself to stay calm and methodical. I took pictures of every single document with my phone, being careful to photograph them exactly as I'd found them. Then I carefully placed everything back in the briefcase exactly as it had been scattered, making sure the latches would pop open again when moved. The reality hit me like a physical blow. My son, the boy I'd raised and loved unconditionally, had been planning something terrible. These weren't legitimate insurance policies. They were the foundation for something much darker. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind raced as I connected dots I'd been blind to for months. David's sudden return to my life, his intense interest in my health, his questions about my routines, all took on a sinister new meaning. I remembered conversations I'd dismissed as professional curiosity. David had asked detailed questions about my gambling habits, mentioning that insurance companies often investigated policyholders' lifestyles. He'd asked if I ever drank alcohol, used any recreational drugs, or had any dangerous hobbies. At the time, I'd laughed and told him my most dangerous activity was climbing stepladders to change light bulbs. Financial problems I'd thought were behind him suddenly made sense. David's expensive new car, his designer clothes, his nice downtown apartment. He'd claimed business was booming, but now I wondered if he'd been taking out loans against expected insurance payouts. I started researching online typing searches I never imagined I'd need: insurance fraud, forged signatures on policies, elderly parents murdered for insurance money. The stories I found were horrifying, but familiar. Adult children taking out massive life insurance policies on aging parents, then orchestrating accidents or using untraceable poisons. The blood pressure medication incident took on new meaning. I'd been having dizzy spells lately, feeling nauseous after some meals, experiencing episodes of confusion that I'd attributed to normal aging. What if David had been tampering with my medication? I checked my medicine cabinet carefully. My blood pressure pills looked slightly different than usual, smaller and a paler shade of blue. When I compared them to an older bottle I found in my bathroom drawer, the difference was obvious. Someone had been replacing my prescribed medication with something else. Margaret's casual comments about David's visits became more significant. She'd mentioned seeing him at the pharmacy several times, picking up prescriptions for me that I'd never requested. She'd also noticed him coming and going from my house at odd hours, sometimes very early in the morning or late at night, when she knew I was usually asleep. I recalled recent accidents around my house that now seemed deliberate. The handrail on my front steps had become loose, something David had offered to fix, but had somehow made worse. My gas stove knobs had been mysteriously turned on several times, filling my kitchen with gas, until I noticed the smell. The ice maker in my refrigerator had started making strange noises and leaking, creating slippery puddles on my kitchen floor. Each incident alone seemed like normal wear and tear on an older house. Together, they painted a picture of someone systematically creating hazards, hoping one might lead to a fatal accident. The most chilling realization was how perfectly positioned David was to inherit everything. As my only living child and closest family member, he would naturally be my main beneficiary. Combined with the insurance money, my death would solve all his financial problems and set him up for life. I thought about Sarah, his girlfriend. Had he involved her in this plan? Or was she another potential victim? Someone else with an elderly mother or valuable assets? The thought that my son might be a serial predator targeting vulnerable older women made me physically sick. But I also felt something else emerging alongside the fear and betrayal anger. Cold, determined anger at being treated like a victim by someone I'd loved and trusted completely. The next evening, David returned for dinner as planned. His behavior was markedly different. He was extra cheerful, almost manic in his attentiveness. He'd brought my favorite takeout from Romano's, the Italian place downtown, and insisted on serving everything himself. "Mom, you just relax," he said, practically pushing me into my favorite armchair. "Let me take care of everything tonight. You've been working too hard lately." I watched him move around my kitchen with an efficiency that now seemed practiced and calculated. He knew exactly where everything was moved, with the confidence of someone who'd planned this moment carefully. When he brought me a glass of water, his smile seemed forced. The glass itself looked wrong, somehow slightly cloudy rather than crystal clear. When I lifted it to my lips, there was a faint, bitter smell that definitely wasn't normal tap water. My years of teaching had trained me to stay calm in difficult situations, to think quickly while maintaining composure. I smiled back at David and said, "This is so sweet of you, honey. Let me just use the bathroom first." In the bathroom, I poured most of the water into the sink, leaving just enough to wet my lips. When I returned, I pretended to take small sips while actually spitting the liquid into my napkin when David wasn't looking directly at me. His attention to my water consumption was intense. He kept encouraging me to drink more, saying I looked dehydrated. When I set the glass down after pretending to take a larger sip, his eyes followed it with obvious disappointment. "You really should finish that," he insisted. "Staying hydrated is so important at your age. Dr. Patterson always says elderly people don't drink enough water." The conversation took an increasingly dark turn. David began talking about funeral arrangements, claiming he'd been thinking about family planning and wanted to make sure he understood my wishes, just in case something happened. "God forbid anything should happen to you, Mom," he said, his voice taking on a rehearsed quality. "But I want to make sure I handle everything exactly how you'd want. Do you prefer burial or cremation? Should we have the service at St. Matthew's? Do you want a simple ceremony or something more elaborate?" His questions became more specific and urgent. Did I want flowers at my funeral? What songs should they play? Who should he contact when I died? The conversation felt like a script he'd practiced, and his eyes remained cold even when his voice expressed concern. When I excused myself to water the plants by my kitchen window, I poured the remaining water from my glass into the soil of my potted fern. David didn't notice, focused as he was on describing cemetery plots and burial costs. As the evening progressed, his mask began slipping. When I didn't show signs of the illness or confusion he was obviously expecting, his frustration became visible. His smile grew tighter, his questions more insistent. "Are you feeling all right, Mom? You look a little pale. Maybe you should sit down and drink some more water. I can get you another glass." The threat in his voice, barely concealed behind fake concern, confirmed every horrible suspicion I'd developed. This wasn't my son anymore. This was a stranger, wearing David's face, someone who saw me as nothing more than an obstacle to financial freedom. The next morning, I took action. First, I called Patricia Williams, a lawyer who'd been my friend since college and had handled my will and estate planning for years. I asked her to meet me urgently and privately. Patricia arrived within an hour, and I showed her everything I'd discovered. Her face grew pale as she examined the forged insurance documents and read through the research materials David had compiled. "Irene, this is attempted murder," Patricia said bluntly. "We need to contact the police immediately." But I asked her to wait. I had a plan that would ensure David couldn't hurt me or anyone else ever again. We spent the morning contacting both insurance companies, reporting the fraudulent applications. Both companies confirmed they'd received the paperwork, but hadn't yet processed the policies due to missing medical examinations. Patricia helped me set up a meeting with Detective Sarah Chen from the Greenfield Police Department. We provided copies of all the evidence and developed a strategy to catch David in the act while protecting me from immediate danger. I also reached out to Margaret's teenage grandson, Tyler, who was studying computer science at the local community college. For $50, he agreed to install tiny wireless cameras throughout my house, hidden in picture frames and behind books where David would never notice them. The cameras would record everything David did during his next visit, providing visual evidence of any attempt to poison me or create dangerous situations. Tyler also helped me set up a panic button app on my phone that would immediately alert both Patricia and Detective Chen if I felt threatened. On Thursday afternoon, I called David and invited him for our usual Sunday dinner, acting completely normal. He accepted eagerly, his voice taking on that false cheerfulness I now recognized as manipulation. Patricia arranged to be nearby during David's visit, parked down the street with Detective Chen, and ready to intervene at my signal. We also contacted Dr. Patterson's office and discovered that David had indeed been picking up prescriptions in my name using forged authorizations. Friday morning brought devastating news that confirmed our worst fears. Margaret called in tears to tell me that my potted fern, the one I'd watered with David's suspicious glass of water, had died overnight. The leaves had turned black, and the soil smelled chemical and wrong. Detective Chen arranged for the plant to be tested at the state crime lab. Within hours, they confirmed the soil contained a lethal concentration of digitalis, a heart medication that becomes extremely toxic in high doses. Mixed with my actual blood pressure medication, it would have caused immediate cardiac arrest. David had literally tried to poison me with a smile on his face. Sunday arrived, and I was ready. The cameras were recording Patricia, and Detective Chen were in position, and I had carefully planned every detail of the confrontation. When David knocked on my door at 5 o'clock sharp, carrying flowers and wearing his usual mask of false concern, I knew it would be the last time he'd ever have the chance to hurt me. David arrived with yellow roses and his practiced smile, but I could see the predator behind his eyes now. During dinner, I waited until he served me another glass of water, this one even more obviously tampered with than the previous glass. "David," I said calmly, setting the glass down untouched. "We need to talk about something important." His expression shifted slightly, wariness creeping into his features. "Of course, Mom. What's on your mind?" I pulled out printed copies of the insurance documents and placed them on the table between us. "I need you to explain these life insurance policies you took out on me, the ones worth $1.4 million that I never signed for." The transformation was immediate and terrifying. David's careful mask dissolved completely, revealing cold calculation underneath. He didn't deny anything or try to explain. Instead, he leaned back in his chair and smiled with genuine malice. "You weren't supposed to find those," he said, his voice completely different now, flat and emotionless. "You're getting old, Mom. Forgetful. You probably signed those applications and just don't remember." "I never signed anything," I replied steadily. "And I certainly never agreed to medical examinations or provided detailed health information to insurance companies I've never contacted." David stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "You should have just minded your own business and drunk your water like a good little old lady." The admission sent chills down my spine, but I forced myself to remain calm. "So you did poison it." "Digitalis," he said matter-of-factly. "From foxglove plants, completely natural, and in someone your age with heart problems, it would look like a simple cardiac event. No one would question it." Patricia chose that moment to ring my doorbell, arriving exactly on schedule. David's eyes darted toward the sound, confusion replacing confidence. "I invited Patricia Williams to join us," I announced. "You remember Patricia, don't you? She's been our family lawyer for 20 years. When Patricia entered with Detective Chen right behind her, David's demeanor changed completely. He became aggressive, verbally abusive, screaming accusations about conspiracies and ungrateful mothers. "You have no idea what you've cost me," he shouted. "Do you know how much money I owe? How many people are depending on that insurance payout? You selfish old woman. You should have died quietly and made everyone's lives easier." Detective Chen arrested David on the spot for attempted murder, insurance fraud, and elder abuse. As they read him his rights, he continued ranting about money he'd already spent against the expected insurance settlements and threats from people he owed. The investigation that followed revealed the full scope of David's plans. Police found detailed research about elderly vulnerabilities, timing charts for my daily routines, and even backup plans involving staged accidents if the poisoning hadn't worked. Most shocking was the discovery that David had been researching Sarah's elderly mother, as well asking similar questions about her health, finances, and daily habits. Sarah, horrified to learn she'd been dating a potential serial killer, immediately provided police with additional evidence about David's manipulative behavior. Within a week, news of David's arrest spread through our small town. 3 other elderly women came forward with stories of David showing unusual interest in their personal information and family dynamics. While he hadn't targeted them directly yet, investigators believed he was building a list of potential future victims. The community rallied around me in ways I never expected. Former students, now adults themselves, stopped by to check on me. Church members organized meal trains and grocery runs. Neighbors like Margaret made sure I was never alone during the difficult weeks following David's arrest. The months following David's arrest were the most difficult of my life. I had to confront the reality that the son I'd loved and raised had become someone capable of murdering me for money. The grief was overwhelming, like experiencing his death, while knowing he was still alive, just irredeemably changed. Therapy helped me work through the complex emotions of betrayal survivors' guilt and the particular pain of being targeted by your own child. Dr. Rebecca Martinez, a counselor who specialized in family trauma, helped me understand that David's transformation wasn't my fault as a mother. The legal proceedings took 8 months. David eventually pleaded guilty to attempted murder, multiple counts of insurance fraud, and elder abuse. He received a sentence of 25 years without possibility of parole. During his sentencing hearing, he showed no remorse, maintaining that he'd been justified in his actions because of his financial difficulties. Sarah proved instrumental in the investigation, providing additional evidence about David's manipulative behavior and concerning questions about vulnerable elderly people in the community. She'd broken up with him immediately after learning about his true nature and cooperated fully with prosecutors. The trial revealed that David had accumulated gambling debts exceeding $200,000 and had borrowed money from dangerous people who were demanding repayment. His successful insurance agent persona had been largely fabricated. He'd been struggling professionally and had seen murdering me as his solution to multiple problems. During my victim impact statement, I spoke directly to David about the devastation his betrayal had caused, not just to me, but to our entire family legacy. I also expressed hope that his incarceration might eventually lead to genuine reflection and change, though I acknowledged I might never see evidence of that transformation. The experience led me to discover new purpose in life. I began volunteering with the area agency on aging teaching classes about elder safety and financial protection. My story, while painful, became a powerful tool for educating other seniors about warning signs of family financial abuse. I learned that David's case wasn't unique. Adult children taking advantage of aging parents is unfortunately common, though rarely does it escalate to attempted murder. My classes focus on practical steps seniors can take to protect themselves while maintaining healthy family relationships. Building new relationships became essential to my healing process. I developed deeper friendships with neighbors, joined a book club at the library, and even started dating a widowed gentleman from my church named Robert. Learning to trust again required patience and courage, but isolation would have been a victory for David's destructive influence. Margaret and I became especially close, united by the shared experience of recognizing danger and supporting each other through difficult times. She often jokes that we're the neighborhood crime-fighting duo, watching out for suspicious behavior and checking on elderly residents who might be vulnerable. The insurance companies involved in David's fraudulent applications implemented new verification procedures partly based on my case. They now require in-person interviews and independent medical examinations before approving large policies on elderly individuals, making similar fraud more difficult to execute. 2 years later, I've found peace with my decision to prosecute David fully. Some family friends questioned whether sending my own son to prison was the right choice, but I knew that allowing him to escape consequences would have endangered other innocent people. His arrest likely saved multiple lives. My small act of courage in investigating those insurance documents and refusing to drink poisoned water rippled outward, creating positive changes that protected entire communities of vulnerable seniors. Sometimes the most important thing you can do is refuse to be a victim, even when that means accepting painful truths about people you love unconditionally. I still live in the same house, surrounded by neighbors who've become chosen family. The cameras Tyler installed remain active not because I live in fear, but because taking practical safety precautions allows me to enjoy life fully without constant worry. David writes letters occasionally from prison, still maintaining his innocence and asking for money for commissary items. I don't respond, having learned that some relationships become too toxic to maintain, even with your own children. My therapist helped me understand that protecting myself from further manipulation isn't cruel. It's necessary for continued healing and growth. The yellow roses that were once my favorites now remind me too much of David's deception, so I've switched to growing purple lavender in my garden. The scent is calming, and watching something beautiful grow from careful tending feels like a metaphor for rebuilding life after betrayal. Every day now brings small moments of gratitude for survival's second chances and the unexpected strength that emerges when facing impossible situations. My experience taught me that sometimes loving someone means accepting that they've become dangerous, and protecting yourself from that danger is an act of wisdom, not weakness. If you've experienced family betrayal or elder abuse, please know that you're not alone, and that seeking help isn't a betrayal of family loyalty. What happened to me could happen to anyone, but it doesn't have to define the rest of your story. Thank you for listening to my journey and allowing me to share this difficult but important story. Have you or someone you know ever experienced warning signs of financial elder abuse? I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Please like this video if my story resonated with you, subscribe for more real-life experiences, and share this with anyone who might benefit from hearing about the importance of staying vigilant and trusting your instincts. Remember, your safety and well-being matter more than anyone's feelings, even family members who might not have your best interests at heart. Stay strong, stay aware, and never apologize for protecting yourself from those who would harm you.